All right, good morning, everybody. I'm KHOU 11 meteorologist Tim Pandages here with an update on Hurricane Ida. Category 1 storm is the latest, 85-mile-per-hour winds. So if you've been watching this storm, I know there's a lot of interest in it. Over the last several advisories, the storm has maintained its intensity. For the short term, that's a good thing, but there are several indicators present right now that show that rapid intensification is not too far off and may already be occurring. I'll show you those reasons in just a few seconds. Expected to make landfall as a Category 4 major hurricane at 130 miles per hour. We're talking in about 28 to 38 hours from now, tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening, bringing with it those winds 130, gusting to 160, 165. It could even be a little bit stronger than that as we approach landfall tomorrow in the southeast coast of Louisiana. All right, here's how it looks on satellite imagery. An impressive looking image there as it's sitting over the extremely conducive environment over the Gulf of Mexico. We've got the very warm sea surface temperatures. We've got a loop current that I'll talk more about. So this makes rapid intensification all that more likely. In fact, it's already happened with this system just before it made landfall in Cuba. It intensified from a tropical storm to a Category 1 hurricane. Now, the latest stats on this, 85-mile-an-hour winds sustained near the center. Hurricane force winds are only extending out about 20 miles on the northeast side of the storm. So a relatively condensed wind field. That's expected to expand as it goes forward and gains latitude as it heads towards the southeast coast of Louisiana. Right now, its movement due northwest at 16 miles per hour. So it's not all that slow, but it's not all that fast, and it's still going to give it plenty of time over that bathwater to intensify. Pressure has been slowly dropping. We're down to 984 millibars at the moment. Here is the latest updated track. We're going off the 10 o'clock advisory. The only change here really is that landfall is expected max winds at 130. That's down from 140. It doesn't really look like an improvement at all because that certainly can be higher than that. And I don't think many of us can distinguish the difference between 130 and 140 with sustained winds, especially when you're out in it. So impacts will still be the same. We're still talking inundation with storm surge 10 to 15 feet. And of course, winds that strong will just bring widespread power outage and down trees. But around Sunday, 7 p.m., 130 mile per hour winds moving inland. Once it gets away from its fuel source, the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, we'll start to see it rapidly deteriorate. Also, the winds will drop significantly. The introduction of the frictional component of this as it moves on land will slow down those wind speeds, but nonetheless, still almost hurricane force winds as we go forward as it moves inland into Louisiana. So you're going to hear the term rapid intensification quite often over the next 24 hours as it heads towards landfall by tomorrow afternoon. Now, what exactly is it? Rapid intensification is defined as an increase in maximum sustained winds, about 30 knots, which is roughly 34 to 35 miles per hour in 24 hours worth of time. Now, the prospects for this storm doing that, it seems like it will do more than rapidly intensify. Maybe 40, 50 mile per hour winds increased in 24 hours easily. Now, we are going off the 10 o'clock advisory, and just for your knowledge, the next advisory comes out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. There are 8 throughout the day, 4 intermediate advisories, and 4 full updates. The full updates bring us the cone changes, the forecast track, and any shifts that are necessary are released during that time. So the next full advisory will come our way at 4 o'clock this afternoon, and then another at 10 p.m. In between, we'll see updates on the storm's intensity and its position as it tracks farther to the north and west. All right, modeling on this has been remarkably consensus. The consensus has been remarkable is what I'm trying to say. It's been on target with this in the same area for the last several days, which is really interesting to see here. All of the spaghetti plots here, and you can see on either side is the bounds of the cone of uncertainty there. All of the models are within that cone of uncertainty. On top of that, our global models, the GFS and the European, have really been locked onto this scenario of a landfall in southeast Louisiana for like the last 3-4 days. And to see both models overlaid on top of each other like this is very unusual as well. So there's high confidence in this forecast going forward as it moves to the north and west. Sure, there are variables that can alter the track and we could see a wobble east or west, but I don't think we're looking at any considerable track changes as we go forward in the next 24 hours here. So let's explain what you're actually looking at here. The GFS and the European model. The European's in the red, The GFS is in the yellow. And these lines are isobars, lines of equal pressure. The tighter they are together, the tighter the pressure gradient, meaning the stronger the storm, the stronger the winds. Watch as we go forward here, still right into tomorrow or to this evening, 7 p.m., still both models right on top of each other. Into early Sunday morning at 1 a.m., more of the same. Now, there starts to be a little bit of discrepancy here as we get to early Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Not in terms of landfall location, but the speed in which that landfall occurs. The GFS is a little bit faster. You see it racing ahead of the European, and it makes landfall maybe 3 or 4 hours earlier than what the European is saying here. Similar intensities, similar locations here. What looks to be west of New Orleans, meaning they will be on the dirty side of the storm with the strongest winds and that storm surge moving inland from there, driving those winds and driving those waves much, much higher as we go through the day tomorrow and after landfall. Moving inland, still a very strong storm as it moves to the east of Lake Charles near Alexandria, Baton Rouge area, and then racing north towards Jackson and starting to weaken, but it's going to have a ton of moisture with it and strong winds even well inland. Now let's diagnose exactly what's happening with this storm at the moment. This is infrared satellite imagery, and why we use this particular filter is it tells us the temperature of the cloud tops. And why that's important, the colder the cloud tops, the higher they are reaching into the sky, the stronger the convective activity is. And with hurricanes, strong hurricanes, you see strong or intense convective activity. And what we see here is the shades of black and the white showing up near the center of Ida is indicating strong convective activity, an indicator that this storm is on its way to rapidly intensifying. In fact, the latest imagery right here shows that Ida is beginning to open its eye. An eye is developing, visible on the satellite imagery, and also more worrisome are these little pockets of white showing up here. These are what we refer as hot towers. This is associated with extremely quickly rising air and is an indicator that rapid intensification is likely underway. And these will pivot around that storm center here and just flare up more and more convective activity. So that is not a good signal right there. Even though we've maintained its strength at 85 for the last 6 to 8 hours, it is not going to be this weak for very long at all. In fact, it's going to jump in intensity likely by that 1 o'clock advisory. So we've had aircraft in the system almost constantly for the last few days. Air Force Recon Hurricane Hunter aircraft recent pass found a drop in pressure here down to 982 millibars. Still seeing wind speeds at 75, but again, this was just one marker there. And on the northeast side of that storm, as we get over here, we'll probably find some stronger winds in the next pass it makes. On visible satellite imagery, now that we have the sun up, we can see the storm with the visible imagery. You can see the eyes starting to clear out there, and we see those hot towers popping up, those high convective activity all around that storm center there, and we'll likely see it intensify as we go forward in the short term. Water vapor imagery, more of the same. You can see that flare up. And what's interesting here, on its far westernmost flank, it's almost like there's a barrier wall setting up here, keeping all of the dry air away from that storm center. So that's very interesting to see flaring up there, kind of almost walling it off from pulling any of that dry air in. And dry air getting entrained in that storm center would be one way that we could weaken the system, but that is not looking likely here. So let's talk about factors that will maximize the intensity of Ida going forward. There are lots of them. Almost every variable is ideal for this storm to intensify and intensify rapidly, which is what's been forecast for the last couple of days. So we got sea surface temperatures well into the 80s, more than enough to support deepening. Now we need 80-degree water or warmer to facilitate latent heat release and absorption by the storm as it goes through. We've got temperatures mid to upper 80s, even around 90 degrees as you close into the southeast Louisiana coastline. So a lot of warm water. Not only is it warm on the skin of the ocean, but it extends down to a depth. And we've got a loop current in place as well that is continuously replenishing the warm waters from the Caribbean, kind of moving up into the Gulf. So, and it's right over the track of where Ida is heading. Favorable wind shear and moisture profiles. Again, dry air is a hindrance to a storm. We don't have any of that. And no wind shear either at the moment. Upper level ridging is in place too, and that's pretty much like a high-powered exhaust fan. That's going to allow Ida to ventilate very efficiently and remove its exhaust aloft and just power it further. So that's not a good thing to have in alignment as we go forward for the next 24 hours or so before landfall. All right, there's those sea surface temperatures. They are in the mid-80s, pretty much along its entire forecast track, getting warmer as you get closer to the coastline there, and that is not a good thing. And then on top of that, the ocean heat content is extremely high. The portions of the Western Caribbean were the highest ocean heat content in the entire Atlantic basin, but we have this loop current here. You can see it outlined with this tongue of warm water building in from the Caribbean. And that's not just warm water on the surface, it extends down to a depth. So why that's important is that when hurricanes move over the ocean waters, obviously it's very rough seas. There's mixing going on, something called upwelling. When storms are upwelling the ocean water, they typically pull up cooler waters from the depths. When you've got that warm water extending down to a depth with high ocean heat content like we're seeing here and continuously getting replenished with that loop current, there's almost a limitless amount of heat energy available for this storm, especially along its forecast track. It doesn't look to be going down at all. So that's something that's very worrisome and why forecasters are saying this is going to rapidly intensify again. All right, and there's that upper level feature. We've got an upper level high, an upper level ridge, and that's going to be placed right on top of Ida. That will allow for efficient ventilation of the storm. We have inflow at the surface, rapidly rising air in the center, and then it disperses, divergence aloft. And that high helps that be more efficient and ventilate better and breathe better. Wind shear profile too, a vertically stacked system is what a hurricane is. As I mentioned, the inflow at the surface, outflow aloft. When there's no wind shear in place, we have that vertical structure. Any sort of wind shear tilts the system over and it disrupts its overall wind flow. We are not seeing that here with this particular storm. There's hardly any wind shear at all in the entire Gulf of Mexico right now. So potential limiting factors. We're going to be optimistic here that something will come along, some variable in play that will force this storm to not be as strong and maybe weaken. Possibilities are very small of this happening, though, so that's why I said not many. Wind shear from the outflow of Hurricane Nora. You may say, where is there a Hurricane Nora? Right along the Pacific coast of Mexico, not far off in the scheme of things from where Ida is. I'm going to show you that in a second. Now, an ERC as well could be something that limits the storm intensity, but very, very briefly. An ERC is an eye wall replacement cycle. When storms get extremely strong and intense, they develop a well-defined eye. And eventually that eye closes in on itself and collapses in on itself. And that briefly will lead to a break in the intensifying process and maybe even some gradual weakening briefly. And then a larger eye builds in and replaces it, and then that leads to a period of more intensification. So if we can get that eye wall replacement cycle, if one occurs, to happen before landfall, that could lead to either a plateau in intensity or a brief weakening upon impacting land. We'll see, though. It's really kind of like splitting hairs and trying to get that to occur at landfall. There's really no way to determine or predict when that would happen. All right, here's where Nora is, right there off the Pacific coast of Mexico. And when compared on satellite, it looks a little bit more intense than what's going on with Ida. Now, with this storm, generally in close proximity to Ida, the outflow aloft from this storm could impose some wind shear aloft on Ida that could disrupt its flow. We would love to see that, but likely this would only happen if Ida was to track a little bit farther to the west, which is unlikely at the moment, and wind shear may not impact it at all. So that's something we have to watch too. Now let's talk about the winds and the forecast categories in which they arrive going into tonight and tomorrow. Now we'll start with tropical storm force winds in this kind of aqua blue here. The deeper blue is tropical storm force winds of at least 60 miles per hour. And then we get into even category 3 winds here, right in that northeast quadrant of that storm track. By Sunday morning, portions of southeastern Louisiana already starting to see the winds pick up to tropical storm force, and it only gets stronger from there. As the core builds onshore, the strongest winds, the eye wall moves onshore near Houma. New Orleans getting in on the category winds potentially. Franklin, Baton Rouge, Mandeville, Lafayette. Yeah, all of these areas going to see some very strong winds. But notice the wind field does start to collapse quickly as it moves over land. That frictional component slowing things down and shrinking that wind field. But we could still have some tropical storm winds all the way up into southeastern Arkansas and central and northern Mississippi. So the storm structure could stay intact. The probability of at least seeing hurricane force winds 75 miles per hour greater up to 80, 90%, almost a certainty along where that eye passes. You're going to find the strongest winds in the eye wall, just outside of the center there. All right, and of course with the winds comes storm surge. And some of these numbers are quite scary that are coming out from the National Hurricane Center. This area, very, very susceptible. A lot of swamp marshlands here. And we can get values for storm surge up and over 11 feet. That's the onshore winds continuously pushing the water up and over the low-lying areas, inundating spots. This white area here near New Orleans, down near Golden Meadow, and we have more over near Morgan City. Those are the hurricane protection plans that were imposed after Hurricane Katrina, so the levee system. And that should do its job to protect the city itself from flooding, but we'll see it put to the test here with a track like that and the onshore winds and winds coming in from the east there near Slidell, and the Lake Pontchartrain could pile up that water and really give those levees a run for their money. We'll see how things play out. On top of the storm surge flooding, freshwater flooding too. A lot of rainfall. It's a tropical system. Upwards of a half foot to a foot of rainfall here in a relatively short amount of time, within a 24-hour period. So that will lead to its own flooding issues with storm drainage flooding, poor drainage flooding, rivers and streams getting swollen. So that's going to be its own issue there, especially as it builds farther inland and rains itself out as it moves along the spine of the Appalachians. So that flood potential is moderate to probably even high tomorrow in portions of Louisiana up through Mississippi after that storm makes landfall. And hey, on top of that, it is close to the peak of the season, and we've got Tropical Depression number 10. Notice where it is. Not going to impact any land, and it's not going to be around for very long. It'll likely strengthen today to Tropical Storm Julian, the 10th named storm of the season, but not last long. It's going to move north and eventually deteriorate, so we won't have to worry about it, thankfully. All right, until next time, until the next update, we'll try to do one at every update from the National Hurricane Center to give you any latest changes in that forecast track or intensity. But you can find me on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. We'll see you next time.